the night two killers vanished. It was just after midnight on June 6, 2015. Inside Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York, correction officers began their normal morning count. This prison was one of the oldest and most secure maximum security prisons in America. Thick stone walls, steel bars, armed guards, and multiple security checkpoints made escape seem almost impossible. But something was terribly wrong. Two dangerous convicted murderers were missing. Their names were Richard Matt and David Sweat. When officers looked inside their prison cells, they saw what looked like two sleeping men lying under blankets. But when they got closer, they realized the truth. The bodies were fake. The heads were made from clothing, skin-colored materials, and carefully painted features. The fake dummies were placed perfectly to fool guards during nighttime checks. The real prisoners were gone. A prison built to keep America's most dangerous criminals locked away had just suffered one of the most embarrassing security failures in modern history. Within minutes, alarms echoed throughout the prison. Every door was locked. Every inmate was counted. Every available officer began searching the prison from top to bottom. But Richard Matt and David Sweat had disappeared. No one knew where they had gone. No one knew how they had escaped. And even more frightening, no one knew if they were still inside the prison or already miles away. Police quickly notified local authorities. The New York State Police launched an emergency response. Roads around Dannemora were closed. Residents were told to stay inside their homes. Schools canceled activities. Businesses locked their doors. Helicopters filled the sky while officers searched forests, roads, and nearby towns. News spread across America within hours. People could hardly believe what they were hearing. How could two convicted killers escape from one of New York's toughest maximum security prisons? The answer would shock investigators. This was not a sudden decision. It had taken months of careful planning. Every move had been calculated. Every weakness had been studied. The escape route was unlike anything many investigators had ever seen. Instead of climbing over prison walls, instead of fighting guards, instead of using weapons, the two men had gone somewhere almost no one expected. They disappeared beneath the prison itself. Deep below the cell blocks was a maze of narrow tunnels, steam pipes, catwalks, maintenance areas, and underground utility passages that most prisoners never even knew existed. Somehow, Richard Matt and David Sweat had reached them. The escape was so carefully planned that investigators later described it as one of the most sophisticated prison breaks in recent American history. But before understanding how they escaped, we first need to understand who these two men really were. Neither of them had anything left to lose. Richard Matt was already serving a sentence of 25 years to life after being convicted for the 1997 kidnapping, torture, and murder of his former employer, William Rickerson. David Sweat was serving life without the possibility of parole after being convicted for the 2002 murder of Broome County Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Tarsia during a robbery. Both men knew they would likely spend the rest of their lives behind prison walls. For them, freedom seemed impossible, unless they created their own opportunity. What prison officials did not realize was that, while serving their sentences, the two men had quietly formed a dangerous partnership. One had years of experience manipulating people. The other was patient, disciplined, and mechanically skilled. Together, they would begin planning an escape that would embarrass an entire prison system and trigger one of the largest manhunts in New York history. Richard Matt and David Sweat did not wake up one day and suddenly decide to escape. According to investigators, the plan took shape over several months. It required patience, careful timing, and a deep understanding of how the prison worked. Every day, they watched the routines of correction officers. They noticed when guards made their rounds, when noise from the prison covered other sounds, and which areas received the least attention. Unlike the movies, there were no explosions or dramatic fights. This escape depended on something much more dangerous: planning. Clinton Correctional Facility was more than 150 years old. Built in the 1800s, it had been expanded and repaired many times over the years. Beneath the prison was a complicated network of steam pipes, utility tunnels, catwalks, and maintenance spaces used by prison workers. Most inmates never saw these hidden areas. Matt and Sweat believed those forgotten spaces could become their road to freedom. Investigators later found that the two men had slowly cut through the steel walls at the back of their prison cells. They reportedly used hacksaw blades and other tools that should never have been available to inmates. Officials later concluded that these tools had been smuggled into the prison. The work had to be done in complete secrecy. Cutting through thick steel created noise. It also created metal dust. To avoid being discovered, the prisoners worked during times when loud prison machinery or steam systems could help cover the sound. They cleaned up carefully after each work session, making sure correction officers would not notice anything unusual during inspections. Little by little, night after night, the opening became larger. Eventually, they created enough space to squeeze through the back of their cells. But escaping the cells was only the beginning. Behind the walls was a maze of narrow passages, pipes, and dark maintenance areas. The prisoners studied these hidden spaces and slowly figured out a route toward the outside of the prison. The journey was extremely dangerous. Some passages were cramped. Others were hot from steam pipes. Many were completely dark. One wrong turn could have trapped them underground, yet they kept moving forward. Investigators later determined that the men also cut through additional barriers inside the maintenance system as they made their way toward an exit point. The work required time, physical effort, and remarkable patience. As officials pieced together the escape, another surprising detail came to light. A civilian prison employee named Joyce Mitchell had become involved with the two inmates. Mitchell worked as an industrial training supervisor in the prison's tailor shop, where both Matt and Sweat had assignments. The official investigation later concluded that she had developed inappropriate relationships with both men. Prosecutors said she smuggled items into the prison that helped support the escape plan, including tools used to cut through metal. Authorities also revealed another shocking allegation. According to investigators and later court records, the escape plan originally called for Mitchell to meet the two men after they reached the outside. She was expected to pick them up in a vehicle and help them leave the area. But that never happened. Mitchell later told investigators that she suffered what she described as a panic attack and instead went to a hospital with chest pains on the day she was supposed to help. Because she did not arrive at the meeting point, Matt and Sweat were forced to continue on foot. That single decision changed everything. Without a waiting car, the escaped prisoners had to move through unfamiliar countryside, making them far more likely to be seen. Back inside the prison, no one realized what had happened. The fake bodies remained in the beds. The prison followed its normal routine. Every passing hour gave the escapees a greater head start. By the time officers finally discovered the empty cells, Richard, Matt, and David Sweat were already outside the prison walls, somewhere in northern New York. The largest manhunt the region had seen in decades was about to begin, and thousands of officers had no idea where to start. As the sun rose over northern New York on June 6, 2015, the news spread quickly. Two convicted killers had escaped from one of the state's most secure prisons. Within hours, what began as a prison emergency became a statewide crisis. The New York State Police, the New York Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, local sheriff's offices, the U.S. Border Patrol, and the FBI joined the search. Hundreds of officers were soon deployed. That number would eventually grow to more than 1,300 law enforcement officers, making it one of the largest manhunts in New York State history. The prison sits only about 20 miles, 32 kilometers, from the Canadian border. This immediately raised a frightening possibility. Had Richard, Matt, and David Sweat already crossed into Canada? Or were they still hiding somewhere in the thick forests surrounding Dannemora? No one knew. The uncertainty forced investigators to search in every direction at once. Roadblocks appeared across the region. Officers stopped vehicles and checked identification. Helicopters flew low over forests and farmland. Police dogs searched fields, rivers, and abandoned buildings. Special tactical teams moved carefully through dense woods, where visibility was often only a few feet. Residents were urged to lock their doors. People were told not to approach strangers. Hunters, campers, and hikers were warned to stay away from remote areas until the fugitives were found. The fear was real. Richard, Matt, and David Sweat were not serving short sentences. They were convicted murderers with nothing left to lose. Investigators believed they could be desperate, and dangerous if cornered. As the search expanded, detectives focused on understanding exactly how the escape had happened. They carefully examined the prisoners' cells. Behind the steel walls, they found the holes that Matt and Sweat had secretly cut over many months. The trail continued into the prison's hidden maintenance tunnels. Investigators followed the same dark route the escapees had taken. The tunnels were dirty, narrow, and filled with pipes carrying steam and utilities throughout the prison. In some places, officers had to crawl. In others, they climbed over pipes and squeezed through small openings. The farther they went, the more incredible the escape seemed. Eventually, investigators reached the final section of the route. There, they found a cut made through another barrier leading into a manhole connected to the city's underground system. The prisoners had climbed through that manhole and emerged outside the prison walls during the night. For the first time, investigators could see exactly how the impossible had become possible. Meanwhile, another part of the investigation uncovered an equally shocking betrayal. Joyce Mitchell, the prison employee who had worked with both inmates, was questioned extensively. At first, she denied helping them. But as investigators gathered evidence, including phone records and statements from others, her story began to fall apart. She eventually admitted to providing tools that were used in the escape. Authorities later charged her with promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She would later plead guilty and receive a prison sentence for her role. While investigators uncovered the inside help, Richard Matt and David Sweat were still free. Reports of possible sightings poured in from across the region. Every tip had to be investigated. A person walking along a highway. A stolen item from a hunting cabin. Fresh footprints in the mud. A noise in the woods at night. Most reports led nowhere. But some revealed an important pattern. The escapees were moving through the vast forests and mountains of northern New York, stealing food, clothing, and supplies whenever they could. The wilderness gave them cover, but it also slowed them down. Days turned into weeks. The search became one of endurance. Officers worked around the clock, often sleeping only a few hours before returning to the field. Then, nearly 3 weeks after the escape, the massive manhunt finally caught its first break. A member of the public reported seeing a suspicious man near the small town of Malone, New York. Law enforcement rushed to the area. Within hours, officers would come face to face with one of the escaped killers, and the manhunt would take a dramatic and deadly turn. For nearly 3 weeks, Richard Matt and David Sweat managed to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. They moved mostly at night. They hid during the day. According to investigators, the two men broke into remote hunting cabins and seasonal camps to steal food, clothing, tools, and other supplies. These cabins, scattered across the forests of northern New York, gave them temporary shelter while they tried to avoid being seen. But every day they remained on the run. The search became tighter. More officers arrived. More helicopters filled the skies. More roadblocks appeared. Police carefully studied every new clue. The fugitives were running out of places to hide. Then, on June 26, 2015, 20 days after the escape, everything changed. A U.S. Border Patrol tactical team was searching a wooded area near Malone, New York, less than 30 miles from the Canadian border. At approximately 3:45 p.m., officers spotted a man carrying what appeared to be a shotgun. It was Richard Matt. According to official reports, officers ordered him to stop. Instead, Matt refused to surrender. Authorities said he raised his weapon toward the officers. The Border Patrol agents opened fire. Richard Matt was struck multiple times and died at the scene. The dangerous fugitive, who had helped plan one of America's most famous prison escapes, would never make it to freedom. His death marked a major victory for law enforcement. But the operation was not over. David Sweat was still missing. Unlike Matt, Sweat had remained disciplined throughout the escape. Investigators later believed that he often avoided unnecessary risks and stayed focused on survival. Now he was alone. Police feared he might become even more desperate. The search continued without pause. Hundreds of officers remained in the field. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras searched through the night. Tracking teams followed footprints through forests, streams, and muddy trails. Residents were still warned to stay alert. Then, 2 days later, on June 28, 2015, another breakthrough came. New York State Trooper Jay Cook was driving along State Route 30 near the town of Constable, close to the Canadian border. As he passed a wooded area, he noticed someone walking along the roadside. The man matched David Sweat's description. Trooper Cook immediately turned his patrol vehicle around. Sweat saw the police car and ran into the woods. A chase began. Cook knew he could not allow the convicted murderer to disappear into the forest again. As Sweat fled, the trooper fired 2 shots. One bullet struck Sweat in the shoulder. The wound stopped him from escaping any farther. Officers quickly moved in and arrested him. The 22-day manhunt was finally over. David Sweat survived and was taken to a hospital for treatment before being returned to prison. Unlike Richard Matt, Sweat would live to answer investigators' questions. His capture brought relief across New York and throughout the United States. Families who had spent weeks living in fear could finally return to normal life. Roadblocks were removed. Search helicopters landed. The forests became quiet again. But for prison officials, the investigation was only beginning. How had 2 convicted murderers managed to fool an entire maximum security prison? Why had warning signs been missed? And what failures inside Clinton Correctional Facility had made this escape possible? The answers would expose serious security weaknesses, lead to criminal convictions, and change how prisons across New York approach security for years to come. The capture of David Sweat on June 28, 2015, officially ended one of the most famous prison escapes in modern American history. For 22 days, 2 convicted murderers had managed to stay ahead of more than 1,300 law enforcement officers. They had escaped from one of New York's oldest and most secure prisons, triggering fear across the state and making headlines around the world. But once the excitement of the manhunt was over, investigators faced an even bigger question. How could this have happened? The investigation that followed uncovered a series of failures. Officials found that Richard Matt and David Sweat had spent months cutting through the backs of their prison cells without being detected. They had exploited weaknesses in supervision, security inspections, and access to tools. The age of Clinton Correctional Facility also played a role. Built in the 19th century, the prison's complex network of tunnels, pipes, and maintenance spaces created hidden areas that were difficult to monitor. Investigators also concluded that the escape would likely not have been possible without inside help. Joyce Mitchell admitted that she had smuggled hacksaw blades, chisels, punches, and other tools into the prison by hiding them inside packages of frozen meat. Prosecutors said her inappropriate relationships with both inmates allowed them to manipulate her into helping their plan. In September 2015, Mitchell pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She was sentenced to 2 1/3 to 7 years in prison. Her actions became one of the most shocking parts of the entire case because they showed that even the strongest prison walls can be weakened by human decisions. Another prison employee, Correction Officer Gene Palmer, was also charged after investigators said he unknowingly delivered frozen meat containing tools to the inmates. Palmer maintained that he did not know the tools were hidden inside. In 2016, he was convicted of official misconduct, although more serious charges were not upheld. His case highlighted how even small lapses in prison procedures can have major consequences. The state of New York responded with sweeping changes. Security inspections became more thorough. Search procedures were strengthened. Tool inventories were tightened. Employee training was expanded. Maintenance areas and tunnel access received additional security measures. Officials also reviewed staff conduct policies to reduce the risk of inappropriate relationships between employees and inmates. David Sweat was transferred to another maximum security prison under much stricter conditions. He remains incarcerated and continues serving life, without the possibility of parole for the murder of Deputy Kevin Tarsia. Richard Matt never lived to face justice for the escape. His life ended in the woods of northern New York, just days before his partner was captured. More than a decade later, the Dannemora escape is still studied by correctional officers, investigators, and security experts across the United States. It has also inspired documentaries, books, and the acclaimed television miniseries Escape at Dannemora, bringing the remarkable story to audiences around the world. The escape was extraordinary, not because it proved that maximum security prisons are easy to break out of, but because it demonstrated that even the most secure systems can fail when multiple weaknesses line up at the same time. This was not the story of two men who outsmarted an entire nation through luck alone. It was the story of months of careful planning, manipulation, patience, and security failures that combined into one of the most embarrassing prison breaks in American history. In the end, neither escaped man found the freedom they were chasing. One died during the manhunt. The other returned to a prison cell for the rest of his life. Their escape lasted only 22 days. Its lessons, however, continue to shape prison security in America to this day. Thank you for watching Crime Insight TV. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another true crime investigation. What do you think? Do you believe the Dannemora escape could happen again today, or have modern prison security improvements made a similar escape nearly impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion might be featured in a future Crime Insight TV discussion.